What's up YouTube, this is Paul from Mickey Tech Tips, and today we are going to learn how to plan out a custom PC build, because this could be the most hardest parts on a custom PC build is learning how to pick parts that are compatible and parts that make sense inside the PC build. So I guess let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is we want to figure out what we're going to use this PC for. Are we going to be using this PC to watch videos on our TV in our living room for like a home media center PC? Or are we going to be using it for like web browsing? Or maybe something like video editing and gaming? Because there are certain parts you should buy for each price category and for each use case. So it wouldn't make sense to go buy a overkill Core i7 for a computer that you may just be using to stream YouTube videos on your TV with. Maybe you need just something that works great, but you don't want to spend a bunch of money. So you got to figure out what you're going to be using that PC for. And then the next thing you can do is you're going to figure out, do we want to buy new parts, new/used parts, or just used parts alone? Now, the biggest thing on that is sometimes you get better deals buying used. Sometimes you might just be better off buying just new parts in some cases. And then some you probably should not buy used at all. For example, you may not want to buy a used hard drive or a used SSD for that matter. So you're going to figure that out. Then you're going to figure out, do we want to go AMD or Intel? Now, my suggestion on this is that if you're going to go AMD, you could probably pick up very cheap AMD stuff in the next couple months. Just watch the sales, because AMD is going to try to take an inventory out all the current stock to make room for the new Zen processors and the new motherboards and the new Zen motherboard compatible processors motherboards. Which, why did I say Zen compatible? Because they're gonna take and make current CPUs a little bit different and sell them, so then you can take and build a PC and then just upgrade the CPU later on, because it's going to be totally different. It's confusing, but just trust me on this. AMD is fixing to redo a whole bunch of stuff. And then Intel, you might be able to score some good deals on some stuff soon, because they'll new Kaby Lake architecture's coming out soon, but it won't be that big of a savings. For example, the only thing you might be able to save on is CPUs and maybe some motherboards, because some manufacturers will replace current Skylake motherboards with Kaby Lake / Skylake compatible motherboards, just to refresh branding and stuff. But a lot of times your motherboards on an Intel a new Intel release probably won't be that much of a clearance. So you might be able to save on the CPU end, but nothing else. And then on graphics, right now the two current architectures is AMD's RX 400 series, which that would be I think it'd be Polaris, and then NVIDIA's 10 series, which would be Pascal. So the two big P's. So you're gonna figure out what you want to do with that. Now keep in mind, there's other platforms out there. For example, there is the Intel Enthusiast platform. We're not going to be touching that really today, because it's very overkill for most people. And then AMD, we might touch on some of it, but I'm not going to go too in depth in it, just because honestly AMD is more confusing than Intel right now, especially when they're trying to get rid of stuff and trying to make room for Zen. So we're going to at least cover this on the Intel side, and you might just be better off buying Intel CPUs right now anyway, because it's probably your best bet. So I guess let's go into planning out a desktop PC build. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is go to PCPartPicker.com. I'll have a link down in the description. This is a good website to find PC builds other people have done, and just also maybe just plan out a system build yourself. That's what I did for my personal system, and we'll look at that in a minute. But for now, we're just going to plan out a basic Intel system. So let's say we just want a basic web browsing system, but we don't want major bottlenecks. So let's see, this Intel Core i3-6100, $109. That's not too bad. Want to click add. We just added our first part to our part list. Now, as I said, the current Intel architecture right now is Skylake. Kaby Lake's coming out soon, so maybe you go out and build a PC now and then upgrade the CPU later, because Kaby Lake's going to still use the same socket, which is what you stick the CPU in. When it comes out, it'll be a LGA 1151. I'm tongue-tied today. So, as of right now, the 6000 series of Intel CPUs are current. Now, that's mainly just for the 6100 up to the 6700K and the Xeons, but we're not going to cover the Xeons just because it's another discussion for another day. Anything past the 6700K, so like the 6800K, stuff like the 6850K, and I think the 6900K and the 6950X, we're not going to cover those because those are Intel Extreme Editions, and that's another discussion too, to be able to high-end enthusiast gaming PC that most people probably don't need. So yeah. So then the next thing you're going to do is keep in mind you're going to select a CPU cooler. Now, most processors come with ones on the consumer platform. So, for example, the Skylake series, the Skylake CPUs, they all come with one. And Skylake just stands for the version of CPU architecture, so what's underlying inside of it. So the Skylake CPUs, most of them come with them. The only ones that do not come with them are the OEM ones and the K ones. So the K ones are your overclocking ones. So let's say you built a PC that has a 6600K or 6700K, then you're going to need to add a CPU cooler. Now, if you built something like with an i3-6100, i3-6200, i3-6400, and then, actually, hold on. No, I think the 6400 might be an i5. I could be wrong. I'm not going to look right now just because it takes too much time. And then stuff like the i5-6500 and the i5-6600 and the i7-6700. Those all come with coolers, except the OEM versions and the K versions, which that would be 6600K and 6700K. I'm thinking of Kaby Lake already, because they're using a similar model scheme, except instead of 6, it's like 7. So you can pick a CPU cooler, but the Intel stock one will do just fine. In fact, a lot of people just use the stock one because it works great, but sometimes you may want to put a different cooler on there just to bring down noise and maybe even temps. Now, a great one to pick, so I'm just going to add one anyway, is the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo. A lot of people like this one because it's a basic CPU cooler for $25. Now, keep in mind this is a taller CPU cooler than the Intel stock one, so maybe if you're using a small form factor case, to stay away from it, but this will get the job done. So we're going to add that to the part list. Then the next thing we're going to figure out is motherboard. So on the Skylake CPUs, which are LGA 1151, and there'll also be more motherboards, either refreshed ones or in addition to these for Kaby Lake and any other LGA 1151 CPUs right now. Uh, Picking the motherboard is one of the easiest or hardest ones ever. So, if you're building a system that has a 6600K or 6700K, which is the overclocking processors, then you want a Z170 motherboard. So that includes support for overclocking. But if you don't have a chip with a K at the end, then you're okay with anything else. Now, keep in mind, you can go buy a Z170 board and not have a K chip. In fact, that might even be a good idea. So later on, let's say you upgrade the processor and then you want to overclock it later on, then you can. Whereas if you go buy a motherboard now and then upgrade the processor to a K processor, but you don't have that Z170 motherboard, then you can't overclock it without that motherboard. So take it with a grain of salt. You might be paying more for a Z170 motherboard, but it might be worth it. So it's up to you. Honestly, I think they look like better quality motherboards than any of the other ones. I don't know. No, because the H170 ones, I've heard there are some good ones out there too. But then again, I'm running a Xeon in my system. So we're going to cover some of the different ones. So if you're going really budget oriented, the H110 ones are the most cheapest ones on Skylake. Then you got your B150, which is your business ones. Now, they say gaming, but there's not much difference between the H110 and the B150. Then you got the, I think it's, what else is there? You got the H170, Q170, which is another business one, and Z170. Ignore the Intel 232 and 236. Again, those are Xeon compatible motherboards. We're not going to cover those because that's a different discussion. So we got an i3 in there. Let's see, what do we want to build? We want it to be small form factor, so we're going to go down to mini ITX. Now, for a B150 board, I would not pay $122. In fact, let's filter out everything else. So there we go. Get your H110 boards, and you just go down. Now, if you see stuff like AC at the end, or like Wi-Fi, then these motherboards have Wi-Fi, because usually these smaller motherboards are going to be used for media center PCs and stuff like that, so most than likely they're going to have Wi-Fi. Now, keep in mind, you can only throw one device on those, so like a single graphics card on the ITX, and then the M-ATX, you can throw a graphics card and maybe one other device, and sometimes if they stretch it, then you can throw a graphics card, one other device, so something like a Wi-Fi card, and then also another graphics card. But a lot of times it'll only be one graphics card and one other device on a micro ATX, and then ATX you can throw multiple graphics cards, sometimes up to 3, and then you can also throw in something like a Wi-Fi card. Then they got extended ATX and all that, but that's again for another video once you go past ATX. So let's figure out what we want. So we got an i3 in here. Are we going to keep it an i3? Let's say no. So we're going to look at a Z170 board. So ASRock, I've heard they're a good company. You look through it. That's what it looks like. It isn't too bad of a board. Let's see. That's one of the cheapest H170, not H170, but Z170 ITX board. Then you got and here's the next Z171, another ASRock one. Not much difference. And here we are. Let's see, a gigabyte one, $134. It's a Z170. Not too bad. It looks a lot better than my motherboard in my system. But in the end, let's say we decided on just a basic H110 board because all this is going to be is a media center PC. So let's look at this one. Oh, this one's black. I like this one. So let's add it to our part list. There we go. Now we got to figure out memory. Now, there we are. So DDR4 starts out at 4 gigabytes of memory and then goes up to like 128 and then goes even past that. Um, watch what you put in your motherboard. So that's what I like about this. It'll make sure you do it'll do the right compatibility so you can put in the right memory. So 4 gigabytes is enough to run Windows and a couple programs. But since Chrome uses RAM, and it's just sometimes in general you need more RAM, let's go some um, a little bit more memory. So here we are. So there's some Corsair Value Select RAM. Isn't too bad, but it doesn't have heat spreaders, which that can be a big thing, so that can cool off your RAM. Because sometimes you need to cool off your RAM. Let's see. Let's look at what's this Kingston Fury. And let's open it up a new wave. That ain't too bad. Oh, this is HyperX RAM. So let's add in some Kingston RAM. Now we're gonna figure out our storage. So we have a couple options here. We could use an SSD and a hard drive. The hard drive will be for our bulk storage, and the SSD will be for our mass storage. Or you can just go SSD base or even hard drive base. My recommendation is go a hybrid between SSD and hard drive, just so you have enough room. So one of the best SSDs of our times was the 850 Evo and the 850 Pro series. I've followed these Kingston ones on the SSD now. V300 ones are good. I've also heard, what was it? SanDisk has some good ones. There's some different ones. Intel has some good ones, but they're a little dated right now because Intel doesn't make SSDs that often. There's some different good ones. So to keep stuff simple, let's just go on 850. Let's look at some 850 ones. Let's see. That's it. Oh, and also watch out, because if this says M.2, this is an M.2 SSD, and these aren't compatible with every motherboard. And the reason why it's showing up in here is because you can't get expansion cards and adapters to put them in. So ignore that M.2 form factor, because we're just going to skip that because it's a little bit different. Let's see. Here we go. We have 128 20 gigabyte 850 Evo. Then here we are. We have a 250 gigabyte 850 Evo for $94. That ain't too bad. In fact, it isn't too much more than what I paid for my 120 gigabyte 850 Evo. So we're gonna go with the 250 gigabyte because we can make use of that eventually. And let's see. We need a mechanical drive. This Western Digital Caviar Blue, $48. That ain't too bad. In fact, a lot of people use the blue drives because they're really good budget drives. Now we got to figure out, do we want a video card? I'd say skip this step for now. And let's go for the case, because since this is small form factor, it could limit what we use. So let's see. So for different size cases, we have ATX desktop. I don't know why that's there. I guess it just in general. You got your ATX 4 tower, your ATX mid tower, and your ATX mini tower. I'm using a mid tower on my personal rig, and then my home theater PC, I think it's using a micro ATX, and I think it's a mini tower. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but we're gonna go ITX. So I don't know why they put some of these in here sometimes, but I guess they just do anyway. So let's see. We're going to go Mini ITX desktop. Let's see. It ain't too bad. It's Silverstone. Yeah, that's not what I want. So we're going to go... Actually, I'm going to select Mini ITX tower. So let's see. N1 has some good stuff. Let's see. Yeah, that's a little small. You want to think, what are you gonna exactly put in it? So just keep that in mind. And there's a Node DL4. This is by Fractal Design. Yeah. Now let's see. Okay, let's put HTPC in there too, because sometimes they fall under that. Let's see. Oh, here's the Define Nano S. I actually like this case because it's a smaller case. That ain't too bad. Let's put that in there because it's a smaller case, but it's one of those bigger ITX cases, so you can fit some more stuff in there. So you're not as limited, because usually it's cramped that you can't fit much of anything in there or do cable management. So we'll put a Define Nano S in there. Well, let's see. Now we gotta select a video card. So let's see. We have two choices. We can go the GTX 1060 route, or we can go the RX 480. Let's see how much a 1060 is. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, we'll go the RX 480. So what I'm doing is I'm putting just rudimentary parts in here. You could, if you wanted to save some money, you could probably even go down to an RX 470. But we're just trying to build out a system that has decent entry level specs. Okay, so now this is the power supply. Now, be careful on this, because if you buy the wrong power supply, you can fry your components. So some good brands are EVGA, Corsair, Seasonic. I think Fractal Design still makes power supplies. They're really good. What's another one? Be Quiet. Let me look. I don't know anything about Thermal Take or Innomax power supplies. Okay, let's see. Silverstone, I've heard, makes some good ones. And so yeah. So one of the all-time favorites of most people are Corsair and EVGA. Now I'm using the EVGA in one of my builds, and I'm using a Corsair on my other one. They're both great power supplies. So we're gonna go. Let's look at an EVGA. Now we're gonna go 600 watt. I know this is overkill, but we want to future-proof it. Okay, that's 48.98. Let's see. Let's look at Corsair. I can't spell. 600. Let's see. Okay, hold on. Okay, so we are gonna go the EVGA route this time. So let's see. You could get a modular versus a non-modular power supply. Modular just means you can remove the extra cables. Non-modular means you can't remove any cables, and semi-modular means you can remove some. So we just went for non-modular power supply, which is fine. You just have to hide the cables later. So that just planned us out. I did not include an operating system because a lot of times you can pull off copies, Windows license keys from old PCs. Windows 10, I still think Windows 10, if you install it new, I think you can still use 7 or 8 keys, and it doesn't kill, even though it's past the July 29th date. And I think there's even a workaround about it, so just Google how to upgrade 7 to 10 for free, something like that. It'll explain it. Or you may just have an extra 10 key laying around already. You can also download it from Microsoft, so just look up Windows 10 download, and just make sure you download the right one that corresponds with what key you have. So like if you have Windows 7 or Windows 8 home, you want to download Windows 10 home. Or if you have like Windows 7 or Windows 8 Pro, you want to download Windows 10 Pro. So yeah. Other than that, I think that's about it. There's other stuff like fans and stuff that you can add to it. So like you need basic fans, you might want to add a couple in. So you can click encase fans. You can add different fans in. I'm not going to cover that, but because usually it comes with at least one exhaust fan in the case. But other than that, there you go. Basic PC build. You do that on AMD too. Hold on, I'll bring up one of my AMD part list. Okay, so here's one of my AMD part list. This is for my Media Center PC. I did exactly with that on AMD side. Keep in mind though, on AMD, you do have to deal with pins on the CPU socket. I'm not covering how to build a PC in this video, but basically just how to plan it. So here's all the stuff for that. Watch out if you do go AMD, buy at least a quad core. Don't ever buy a dual core on AMD right now, just because even just having two things open at once, my PC stutters. And luckily I only use it for Media Center PC uses, so like streaming video and stuff, so it's not a big deal. But even on that, having that open and like another tab open, doing something else, it can struggle sometimes. So watch out for that, because they don't have their own version of hyper-threading, which means a little bit more performance than what you actually have. So just watch out for that at the moment. Also, watch out what RAM you buy, because as I said, compatibility is everything. This is DDR3, and this other PC build, we're using DDR4. Sometimes it's backwards compatible, but if you're using like Intel Skylake, you'd want to use DDR4. Don't use DDR3, even though some motherboards support it. Do not use it. So yeah. Other than that, remember to like, comment, subscribe. This is probably a long video. I'm not editing it, so just you're gonna actually I will edit it to put it together, but I'm not going through and figuring out what is what. So yeah. I'll see you guys next time. It's great to be back.